There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cameron Chronicles. We're your new hosts. I'm Ranjan Jindal, joined by my co-host Caleb Dudley. Caleb, welcome to the Cameron Chronicles. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Excited to get started.
Yeah, I am too. If you guys recognize our voices, we were the co-hosts of the Blue Devil Blitz, which was the Chronicles' inaugural Duke football podcast. We had our first season this past fall and winter and had a great time doing it. And I guess we did a decent enough job that they let us on to do the Cameron Chronicles. But yeah, super excited to do this. I know this is a little bit of a late start. We apologize for that, but a lot to get to and a lot to recap. It's been quite a roller coaster season for Duke basketball, but today we'll kind of recap the season, recap last night's game against Pitt. We were recording right after Duke's 80-76 loss to Pittsburgh, their first loss in 8 or 9 games, and then we'll also preview the Louisville game and Clemson game and just talk about Duke's position within the ACC and the country as a whole. So jam-packed podcast episode, but definitely super excited. Just if you guys, are just tuning into Duke basketball, just a quick recap of what's been happening over the course of the season. Duke opened with a home loss to Arizona, a 5-point loss, and then kind of bounced back against Michigan State and Chicago, but had 2 pretty heartbreaking losses on the road to Arkansas and Georgia Tech, in which the Duke Blue Devils started 5-3, and then just kind of went on a winning streak after that. Got a big win up in Madison Square Garden against Baylor, and just continued that streak up through ACC play. But that streak, again, like I said, was broken by the Panthers last night in a great game from both sides, but especially from Panther forward Blake Hinson. And we'll go into that game too, but I guess if we split the season up into kind of 2 halves, that's kind of an oversimplification, but just for this purpose, post-Georgia Tech loss and then pre-Georgia Tech loss, what do you think has changed from the team, and what have you seen as the biggest improvements for Duke?
Yeah, obviously Duke had that 2-game losing stretch where they lost to Arkansas and Georgia Tech in a row, and the biggest thing that stood out to me was not really like an offensive or defensive scheme thing, but just intensity on both sides of the ball. I thought we kind of saw it last year, too, in the Tennessee game and the NCAA tournament where Duke kind of got punked by an older and more physical team. I think especially in Arkansas, when Duke was at full strength, you kind of saw that. Tough environment. Arkansas's a big team. Coach Musselman emphasizes being a physical team. They put in the SEC. A lot of those teams do. And I think you saw Duke just get out-rebounded on the defensive glass, and Arkansas just simply wanted it more. Georgia Tech, obviously Proctor went out the first minute or so. Changed the game immensely, but freshmen Georgia Tech guys like Bandongo just played harder than Duke, simple as that. And so I think up until last night's game against Pitt, and really I didn't see it as much of a problem against Pitt either, was Duke's playing much harder on both sides of the ball now. I think that Georgia Tech loss might have flipped a little bit of a switch there for the Blue Devils, and that's the biggest thing that's changed in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think there's a lot basketball-wise that's changed, but I also I want to say this one thing, and Shire mentioned this after the Charlotte win, which is right after the Georgia Tech game. They played a lot of games back to back to back and really didn't have time to have a complete week of practice following the losses. And, you might say, yeah, they had a couple of days here and there, which is true. But especially during Thanksgiving, they had the Blue Devil Challenge and had a lot of games and not a lot of time to, sit down and assess what has gone wrong. And Shire mentioned how important that week of practice was after the Georgia Tech game, just to kind of reset, have the team play a lot and watch film and recap what needed to improve. And you've seen since then the Blue Devils have played a lot better. Also, just frankly, they've been shooting the ball better. Jared McCain has really come into his own as a spot-up shooter, and he's been phenomenal playing alongside any combination of guards with the injuries. And then Filipowski's struggled initially to start. He has a good shooting stroke. He always has, but he doesn't need to be a high-volume three-point shooter, but especially on pick and pops, because Duke runs the pick and roll so well, that creates another dimension to the offense. And when he's shooting the ball well, this team is really hard to guard. In wins, Duke is shooting 8% better from 3 than in losses. And Duke, like I said, they haven't really been a high-volume three-point team throughout the season. They're not really one of the top three-point shooting teams in terms of attempts. But if you can get that percentage up decently high, it creates a lot of pressure on the defense, and I think that's helped the team in a lot of these recent games in winning. But there's still, obviously places where the team needs to improve, especially when you look at last night's game and then moving forward, there's been some close calls and definitely some places where the team can continue to grow. What do you think are some of those places where Duke can build in the second half of conference play here?
Yeah, the biggest thing to me, I don't know if this is something that can really be solved. More of just a glaring hole is lack of depth. I think we saw it against Pitt. Obviously, Mark Mitchell and Jeremy Roach were both sidelined with knee injuries. Duke just really doesn't have a lot of bodies down low. Like you mentioned, the guards, Foster, McCain, and Proctor can easily fill in for Jeremy Roach without too much of a drop-off. But down low without Mark Mitchell, who's by far their best wing defender, Duke was kind of left in a tough spot. Coach Shire decided to go with Jalen Blakes at the 4, which we talked about we didn't think would be great defensively, even though Blakes is a great defender. And without Mitchell, it's just we saw Blake Henson went off. So I think Duke tried to go after a big in the transfer portal in the offseason, and obviously this didn't work out for whatever reason. But with just Filipowski and Ryan Young down there, with Mark Mitchell out, and then Sean Stewart, we thought might play a lot more than he hasn't quite got there yet in Shire's eyes, obviously. And so without Mitchell, however long he's sidelined, Duke's going to have a tough time down low.
Yeah, definitely sorely missed Derek Lively's rim protecting ability on the defensive side. I know you're a big Lively fan, and that's true. It's not something that can be fixed automatically, but I do think you obviously don't want your team to be injured, but these injuries do help get other players to shine. Proctor mentioned it last year when Jeremy Roach got hurt. He really stepped into his own as a freshman and became the primary ball handler. And then this year, both McCain and Foster have grown. We'll talk a little bit about that in Proctor and Roach's absence. But Mark Mitchell's an interesting case here because at the beginning of the season, like he had that infamous, 1 of 20, 1 of 22 start from behind the arc. And it definitely became clear that teams were approaching him and playing him a lot differently. And he's never going to be a high-volume three-point shooter, and he doesn't really need to be. His stroke doesn't, objectively need some work, but it became mental when teams were playing off of him. I can, definitely see him overthinking it with his shots. But what happened is that just made the offense a lot harder. It decreased spacing on the floor. When teams are playing off Mark Mitchell, it prevents drives. He's great when he can slash and attack the basket and beat you off of his first step. But when defenders are playing off, it's harder to get to the basket. And so he struggled from that. But he still combated that and played great on the defensive end. His hustle has been great. He made a couple of shots there against Notre Dame, which were big. And he had that little 16-point run or something. It was crazy. But he's going to be such a big piece for this team moving forward, especially on the defensive end. But, hopefully all the best for him. We haven't gotten an official injury report yet on how long his knee injury will sideline him for, but that is something that to keep an eye on. On the flip side, there have been a lot of positive surprises. I mentioned Foster and McCain and some of the young guards, but what have you really liked from this team maybe that you didn't expect to see from the beginning or somebody that's exceeded your expectations?
Yeah, for me, I think Jared McCain's the obvious one. We've talked about it already. And, Duke's had a lot of good freshman shooters come in the last, 10 years. Guys highly touted, Luke Kennard's, Gary Trent Jr.'s. But often those guys maybe start off hot and then hit a wall or start off slow and then eventually heat up. We really haven't seen that from McCain. Any sign of slowing down. He led the team in scoring against Pitt. He's shooting 42% from 3 on the season. His rebound's amazing for a guard of his size. Yeah. Gets after it on both ends. I think we didn't know who would be the sixth man coming in, him or Foster, and both of them have played great. McCain obviously seems like maybe one of the best scorers they have. So I think for me, he's definitely been the standout.
Yeah, it's funny. McCain's shooting ability has been great, but you mentioned his rebounding ability as a guard. It's phenomenal. And then also, he was a lot stronger than I thought he was coming in, especially when you see him driving. He uses his jump step, uses his body really well to finish down low. He's got a nice little, jumping off two and has a nice little floater game there. And he can get to the basket and score from all 3 levels. His pull-up jump shot is great. And so just his pure scoring ability has really impressed me. Obviously, we knew he can shoot coming in, but his all-around game has been great for this team. And he's been forced into the starting lineup. He started, every game, and he's played really well in the starting lineup and complemented the guards well. I also think Jeremy Roach has just been tremendous. He's been somebody that, he's just a consistent scorer. When you need a shot, when the offense is struggling, when you need somebody to calm down in the offense and set things up, he's been a great scorer, and he's been so reliable in that. And he runs the pick and roll well. Sorry. And then also, the team will set screens for him, set plays for Jeremy Roach to come off like a double screen and knock down a shot. He's great in that way. And so obviously last night Duke missed him a lot, but we'll see how long he's out for, but he's been a big part of this team. Moving on to the Pittsburgh game, we can talk a little bit more in depth about what happened. Pittsburgh came in to Duke after just 11 days earlier. Duke went to Pittsburgh and won by 22, but Pittsburgh came in and defeated the Blue Devils by 4. I was covering that game with another one of our beats, and the story was Blake Hinson. I mean, he was phenomenal. Obviously, Mark Mitchell's defense was sorely missed, but Hinton was 7 for 7 from 3. His ability to just rise up and shoot over any defender, he's 6'8", he has great size, he has a high release point, and he made some shots over any defender. I think he made even one over Filipowski with a shot clock running down. It was tremendous, and he deserves a lot of credit. But when you analyze the game, when you look at the game, what are some things that maybe went wrong on the Blue Devils side in your mind?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's important to mention that Duke was without 2 starters. Obviously, it changes the game plan a lot. Rebounding, Pitt had 7 more rebounds than Duke. It's hard to rebound when your power forward is maybe 6'2", 6'3". But for Duke, I think they honestly played a solid game on offense. I mean, 76 points isn't bad at all. They shot decent percentages, but Pitt just shot that much better. 50% from 3 for the Panthers. And I think for Duke, Kyle Filipowski tore up Pitt the first time, and kind of has been a theme while he's been at Duke, and played okay against Pitt, but just, kind of seems to get in his own head at times and kind of get frustrated. Had 5 turnovers and 3 fouls. But I think, overall, like you said, the story was just Blake Hinson and those guys just making a big shot whenever they needed to.
Yeah, it was a chippy game for sure. If you guys have seen the famous picture of Blake Hinson jumping up on the desk right after me and Dom Finoli, our other beat, were right there. He was chirping with the Cameron Crazies the whole game, but you know what? Respect to him. He backed his words and played well. I think Filipowski, was efficient and played well, and the offense, in my mind, wasn't really the problem. I think outside of Hinson, you had Jalen Lowe and Carlton Carrington, the freshman backcourt of Pitt. That's going to be a backcourt to watch in the ACC for years to come if they both stay with the Panthers. They're both freshmen that have played tremendous, and Jalen Lowe hit the 30-foot 3 to ice the game. That was probably the biggest shot of his life, so good for him. But I think defensively, especially at the beginning, Duke went down 7-0 or 9-0, and Shire had to call an early timeout. And he said after the game, I asked him, what was his message? Guards were just getting beat, and that wasn't something that had happened in the past, and especially when you have somebody like Jalen Blake's inserted into the lineup. You didn't think that would really happen, but maybe Duke just came out a little bit flat. Sometimes it happens, but it is something to keep an eye on. I think defensively, some of the Pitt guards were able to drive in and space the floor really well, so that did hurt the Blue Devils in that game.
Yeah, I think going off of that too, I thought maybe with Mitchell out, this would be a game where Shire would deploy a lot of Sean Stewart and TJ Power. We saw that was not the case. I think TJ Power had Duke's first 2-point field goal right there at, down the stretch on that putback and offensive rebound. Or first offensive rebound, definitely.
First offensive rebound, yeah.
But Duke only had 2 the whole game, which is a whole different story. But I guess neither one of those guys in Shire's mind are ready yet. We've seen flashes from both of them, but nothing consistent enough to where they could fill in for Mark Mitchell, and just Duke didn't really have the facilities to handle the Panthers.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we've seen flashes. Like, Sean Stewart can jump out of the gym. I mean, he's a freak athlete. He sometimes positionally can get a little bit lost, and that's understandable. I mean, he has a high ceiling, and TJ Power, also on the defensive end, can be a little bit suspect, but he can knock down a shot. But you're right. You were talking about the depth, and that's something that needs to continue to improve for Duke. But quick turnaround for the Blue Devils, going to travel, get a busy week ahead in the ACC. Travel to Louisville first Tuesday night, and then welcome Clemson in Saturday. So an opportunity to bounce back against a struggling Louisville team once again. We'll see if Roach and or Mitchell play for the game, but what are going to be some keys for Duke to bounce back and come up on top against the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think for them, even if Mitchell and Roach don't play, Louisville's been pretty abysmal at guarding the 3-ball.
Yeah.
I think Wake just put 90 on them. And so for Duke, just play their game early on, find shots, open looks. Duke does a good job of that, has for the last 10 games or so. Run things from McCain off a screen. Filipowski pick and pop has been good. I think he's over 40% on the season. Filipowski shooting the 3. So Louisville's not the greatest, as you said, but can beat teams. They beat Miami a week or 2 ago. So just, come in, don't be relaxed just because you're playing Louisville, and just look for a get-back win.
Yeah, and I neglected to mention this earlier, but I was talking about Filipowski's improved shooting, like you were saying. So on the season, he shot 42% from deep. The last 5 games, he shot 63.2% from deep, which is really impressive. And that's probably not going to continue, but as long as he's shooting at that mark, that's going to, or near that mark, or even around 50 or 40, that's going to be really important for this team. And I agree. Just bounce back. Should win against Louisville, but anytime you go in the ACC on the road, you can't overlook a team. And Saturday, Duke will be welcoming Clemson to Cameron Indoor, and Clemson's had kind of an up and down season as well, similar to Duke, but kind of in a reverse order type. Clemson started off really, really well, went out Alabama, won, and then defeated Pittsburgh, South Carolina, TCU, some really good wins for Clemson. And then starting in the ACC slate, lost the first 3 to start the new year after defeating Pittsburgh in that early ACC conference game, and then also lost a heartbreaker to Georgia Tech in double overtime. So Clemson started off 3-4 in the ACC, but still a very formidable team. Just a couple things. Clemson is a very live and die by the 3 type of team. Clemson shoots the ball really well initially they shot the ball really well this season. They have really good shooters. Joe Girard, the transfer from Syracuse, is shooting really well from 3 this season, 42%. PJ Hall, who's all ACC first team center, he's shooting decently well from 3. And then you have some other guys who are also shooting really well. But in Clemson's losses, North Carolina and Georgia Tech come to mind. Clemson shot like 1 for 17 or 18 against North Carolina, and then like 3 for 22 or something like that against Georgia Tech. So that's just not going to cut it. But Clemson is a good shooting team, but they have some defensive struggles, which is uncharacteristic usually for a Brownell team. This is a better offensive team and a worse defensive team than his usual teams, but definitely a team to keep an eye on. Caleb, when you look at this Clemson team and how they match up with Duke, what are some things that Duke can maybe take advantage of?
Yeah, the thing that sticks out to me looking at the stats, Clemson's one of the worst teams in the country at getting teams to turn the ball over. So for Duke, Duke's had struggles at times, but recently with how good their guard play is, they shouldn't have a problem with taking care of the ball. The biggest thing for me there is Tyrese Proctor. He's kind of had an up and down season to this point. We all thought he would take a big sophomore leap after deciding to come back, and we haven't really seen it yet. He dealt with injury, obviously, Georgia Tech game. He was out for a couple games, but for him to be able to really come into his own, they're going to need it against Chase Hunter, and those guards at Clemson are pretty good. So they're going to need, just to take care of the ball, and then Clemson doesn't turn the ball over either. So something's got to give there. But I think Duke, take care of the ball. Going to have to hit the glass. PJ Hall and Ian Shefflin are both great rebounders. If Mitchell's still out, Duke's going to have a really hard time there. But if Mitchell's back, I think, Filipowski and Mitchell with Ryan Young off the bench can make it happen.
Yeah, you alluded to that at the end, but I think the main thing against Clemson is front court depth. The front court matchup is going to be hard. That's one thing where I think Clemson has an advantage because, obviously Clemson has great guards and PJ Hall, but the players I think that will need to watch for this game are Ian Shefflin and Jack Clark for Clemson. I combined 2 names. Jack Clark is a player who transferred in from NC State. He's dealt with injury for a long time, but he's a rebounder with size and can shoot the 3. He's 6'10". And then Ian Shefflin, like you mentioned, is averaging a ridiculous number of rebounds per game. I think he almost is averaging a double-double, 9.6 rebounds per game. He's a great rebounder. And so the front court depth, which has been an issue for Duke these past few games, will be something to keep an eye on against Clemson. And if Duke wants to win, they will have to contain the likes of Shefflin and Clark and even Chauncey Wiggins and RJ Godfrey inside, because Wiggins is another one of those players that he's a different player, much different than Blake Hinson, but he's similar in that he's like 6'9", 6'10", and can shoot over anyone and has a smooth jump shot. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. But it'll be a fun game and fun atmosphere nonetheless. So that is this coming Saturday at 4 p.m. Finally, we'll kind of look at the ACC as a whole. Those of you who listen to the Blue Devil Blitz know we do our little weekly stock up, stock down in the ACC, but we're new here, so we're going to do kind of a halfway point of the year, stock up, stock down in the whole ACC. So, Caleb, I'll start with you.
Yeah, stock up for me is Wake Forest. I didn't really have them on my radar coming into the year as a team that could compete for ACC championship, but they definitely look the part now. Steve Forbes has done a great job. In Winston-Salem, they now are finally healthy with Damari Monsanto back. Has played his first game this past couple days, and Hunter Salas has been great for them. Gonzaga transfer, 40% from 3 on the season, leading scorer for the Demon Deacons, and Cameron Hildreth had big moments against Duke last year. Andrew Carr is good. Efton Reed, when he got eligible, has been really good for them as well. So I think, they always find a way, it just seems, the last couple of years to bring in transfers that gel immediately and have a big impact. So it's continued for this year, obviously, for them. And then stock down, I think Miami is the obvious one. Obviously Final Four last year. We're in the top 15 to start the year and just hasn't really gelled for them yet. I think they'll figure it out at some point, probably. Larry Neg is a great coach, but, no Isaiah Wong, no Jordan Miller. Nigel Pack and Omi are running it back, but just hasn't really quite fit together for them. They lost to Louisville, which is the death sentence for ACC teams or just any team at this point under Kenny Payne's tenure. But I think, the Hurricanes are still very talented. Matthew Cleveland, great player. Luka Poplar, great player. I think they'll figure it out, but to this point, it's disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a crazy loss to Louisville. I still can't believe that. But, yeah, I'm totally with you on Wake Forest. I think there's not many coaches that have used the portal better than C. Forbes over there, and he's done a tremendous job with that. So congratulations to Wake. They've got a great season ahead of them. For me, I'm going to go with North Carolina. Sorry, guys. I got to. North Carolina has played really well of late. I actually went to the Clemson-North Carolina game over break over in Clemson, and the one thing that really impressed me about North Carolina was their defense, because that's something that has not really been great for them at the beginning of the season, but over the past 5 games, they're in the 99th percentile for defensive rating. And so their ability, Clemson was 1 for something from 3, but North Carolina defended the perimeter really well. Joe Girard didn't really get many open shots, and they did a great job of using their length to defend. They did a great job with Bacot and Harrison Ingram. Especially Ingram, he did a really good job. I think Cormac Ryan, the transfer from Notre Dame, has been a big addition. He's been a solid 3-point shooter and somebody that can space the floor. And he'll continue to improve his percentage. It's not great, but he can be somebody that can reliably knock down shots. And then can't talk about North Carolina without talking about RJ Davis. I mean, I've loved this guy for a while now. He's just a tremendous guard who can both get his team involved and this year especially, get his shot off whenever. He has a nice little step back. He can score from anywhere. He's really talented, and he's scoring 20.2 points per game this season, which is incredible. And RJ has really, really improved each year. And now that this is kind of, his team, he's really stepped into that role, and he's been tremendous for the Tar Heels and been a big reason for their success. So he's going to be in all of these, ACC Player of the Year, National Player of the Year talks, stuff like that. So good for RJ and the North Carolina Tar Heels. For my stock down, I'm going to go with Virginia, and I don't think they're playing, terrible per se, but I think Virginia this year is a lot different than Virginia in years past, and part of that is personnel. I mean, part of that is the fact that this team is usually elite at defense. They still played well defensively. I mean, they're still one of the top teams in terms of defensive statistics, but they just don't have the personnel for that. They don't have that interior presence that they sometimes do. Some of their players aren't as defensive oriented. And besides the fact that they do have some good shooters that are shooting the ball pretty well, the team as a whole is not shooting well at all. And their offense has just not been, enough at all, especially on the road. Virginia's lost some pretty bad games on the road recently. They went over to NC State and lost by 16, and then they lost to Wake Forest and Notre Dame by 20. And so that's just not going to be sustainable in this league, especially when you're going to have to play tough teams, really good offensive teams, especially this year in the ACC. There's some good offensive teams, and Virginia's going to have to counter that with some production of their own. And this might just be a transition year, not as talented of a team that they have in years past, but they did get a good win yesterday against Georgia Tech, so we'll see if they can build on that, and hopefully they can to build on that and be good, because the ACC is always better when Virginia is elite. So hopefully Tony Bennett's crew can do that. Looking at the league standings, though, it is really competitive, and I think North Carolina has kind of solidified itself above the rest, but there's still a lot of competition, especially to get those top 4 seeds. That double bye in the ACC is just as important, and so it'll be something to keep an eye on for sure. Next, we'll kind of talk about just some players that we haven't mentioned that have really stood out, maybe not on one of the teams that we mentioned, or it can be just some players that have really played well for their teams. Caleb, I'll start with you. What are some players that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, one that's been impressive to me is Judah Mintz at Syracuse. Syracuse, obviously, it's really weird not seeing Jim Boeheim on the sidelines anymore and them not playing zone, but Mintz has had a good year. He takes a lot of shots for them, but he kind of has to. They've been okay this year, but he's definitely their guy, and 18 points a game, shooting 35% from three. Plays good basketball for sure. And for him, as a young guy, decided to come back, could have gone to the draft. And him and J.J. Starling have been a pretty good combo for the new head coach there, Red Autry. And he's been a standout to me guard-wise. And then down low, Quentin Post. I feel like he's always a solid factor in the ACC. And 17 points a game for the Eagles, Boston College. And he's shooting 44% from three on 3.5 attempts, same amount as Cal Filipowski. And, it's been great. It's a good presence down low. They really missed him for a couple games when he was out with injury. Obviously, they haven't had a great year, Boston College, but he's definitely one of the best big men in the conference.
Yeah, he's great. He also had the flu for a little bit that went through the team, so felt bad for the Eagles there. But, yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm going to go with a couple other players, one who has played really well as of late, and that's Virginia Tech's guard, Sean Padula. He has been tremendous from behind the arc recently, and he's really carried his team to some key wins. They beat Clemson when he scored 32, and then right after that, they lost to Miami, but he still scored 33, 5 for 13 from three, and then 6 for 10 for three against Clemson. And he's somebody who's an experienced guard under Mike White's system. He's been there for a while, and him and Hunter Couture really make Virginia Tech a talented backcourt, and they're somebody to keep an eye on. And then also, Notre Dame hasn't had a great season. They've improved as of late. They started off, pretty lowly, but Marcus Burton, the freshman there, has been a pretty good bright spot for them. He takes a lot of shots, and he has a high volume. So his percentages sometimes aren't all the way there, but he is a tremendous scorer. He's averaging 16.3 points per game. Against Duke, he really did well early on, and the Blue Devils really struggled to contain him and his explosive ability. So he's somebody that will definitely be a solid player in this league for many years. So Marcus Burton has definitely been a bright spot for the Fighting Irish. Last thing that we'll do, we also did this on the Blue Devil Blitz at the beginning of the season, and dare I say we were both pretty successful there in choosing our sleepers. But we like to pick a sleeper team that maybe isn't at the top of the standings right now, but a team that we should keep an eye on for the second half of the conference slate. I guess a little bit more than the second half left. But what's your kind of sleeper team for ACC play?
My sleeper team, you just said probably should be at the top of the standings, but my team is
Okay.
just happens to be there. It's Florida State. Last year, Florida State was, simply put, not very good at basketball. Leonard Hamilton, great coach, just didn't really have the personnel last year. Guys, injuries, not a lot of guys on the team in general, a lot of guys transferred out. But, this year they kind of seem on a similar path. They lost 4 games in a row through November and December, but ever since then, they've really heated it up. They beat Virginia Tech, they beat Wake Forest, they beat Miami. Just lost to Clemson in their past game, but they're 5-2 in the ACC. They don't really have one guy that's kind of carrying the load for him. Bobby Miller's been good. Jameer Watkins has been good. Darren Green's one of the best shooters in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, the Seminoles are always really good defensively. I think we always talk about Leonard Hamilton brings in guys that are freak athletes and are great defenders. So they have that again with Bobby Miller. And so I think, that'll be a tough game for Duke. Florida State gets them at home in the middle of February, and they're definitely a team to watch out for going down the stretch.
Yeah, you're 7'4" with a 8-foot wingspan at Florida State. That's your typical average player. No, but yeah, you're right. They're definitely a team to keep an eye on. I'm definitely with you on Florida State. Mine I just mentioned because I was talking about Padula, but it's Virginia Tech, and this is because I think they have all the kind of pieces to make either a run in the regular season ACC or be a tough out in the ACC tournament. They have a great coach, they have good guard play, and they have an interior presence. Their guard play, I mentioned Sean Padula and Hunter Couture. You think you can even add in Tyler Nickel there, the North Carolina transfer who's coming off the bench and shooting better. Their coach, Mike White, is a tremendous basketball coach from his days at Wofford, and he gets his team to play hard, and they always do game in and game out. And it's just kind of like it's similar to Clemson in that they're a good shooting team, but sometimes when they can live and die by the three a little bit. But what makes Virginia Tech special this year is their interior presence. You have Lynn Kidd, who's really coming to his own as a center. He's averaging 14 points a game. The Clemson transfer has been tremendous and really found his own with the Hokies. So they're definitely a team to watch. But yeah, this season's going to be fun. We're in the heat of the conference season, so this is always the best time for college basketball, so really excited about that. If you want to check out more of the Chronicles' work, definitely go to thedukechronicle.com and follow at Duke Basketball on Twitter. And next week, we're going to be printing out our rivalry print edition in conjunction with North Carolina student paper, the Daily Tar Heel, in preparation for Duke North Carolina's first game, which is crazy that that's coming up. So a lot of coverage over at the Chronicles site and on Twitter as well. So be sure to follow that. But thank you guys so much for listening to the first episode of the Cameron Chronicles with Caleb and I. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back soon. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Cameron Chronicles.